Well, James 4, it got to hit you between the eyes. I don't know how anybody could read James 4 really with a heart for maturity in Christ, as has been the theme in James, with really a heart to know Christ more and live more like him, to learn to trust him fully, and not get to chapter 4 and go, man, I need to take this seriously. I could be dismissive about that, and I could about this, and I could say this is for somebody else, but man, I need to look and say, God, search me and know me and tell me where it is that I fall short in this. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? You know, if we were going to look at division and dissension in the church, isn't it amazing how we've spent months and months going through the epistles now, how much of the epistles are written about division in the church, about Christians not being able to get along? It's heartbreaking. And James here is going to say, well, what causes those quarrels and fights among you? And I bet if you go to anybody that is in a quarrel with somebody else and you say, well, what caused the quarrel? They'd go, they did. Oh, you should have heard what they said. Yeah, and I can't hang out with somebody like that. Well, James has other thoughts. He says, is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? What an important place to start. Your passions are at war within you. You haven't really decided what you want. James is talking to people who he's had to look at and said, hey, faith without works is dead. He's had to look at people and go, stop treating the wealthy people better than you treat the poor people. He's had to look at people and go, man, you need to stop whining about trials and you need to consider these joyful. These are people who love the Lord, but they love the world too. They love the Lord, they love Jesus, but they love their careers and they love their culture. And not in a way that they want to serve their culture, but rather in a way that they want to live for their culture. So he says, here's the problem. Here's why there's quarrels. If you were all single-minded on Christ, there wouldn't be any quarrels. Rather, it's that your passions are at war within you. You desire to have, you don't have, so you murder. Man, he goes all the way to light speed, with that. He says, I don't know if there were actually murders going on in their church or not, but do you get his point? As he says, look, there's jealousy. There's coveting. You're looking at other people, and instead of saying, how can I love them, you're looking at them and going, they have it better than me. The passions are at war within you. You covet, and you cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You do not ask, and you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. I think this is the theme of this chapter in James. Man, you got to be all in. Whatever it is like that you have to reject, just reject it. What is too much to reject for the sake of Jesus? What is it that you would have to say no to? What is it that you would have to give up that you wouldn't receive back 1,000,000 times in the kingdom of heaven? Man, some of us have decided that Jesus is worth some of our life, but not all of our life. And apparently that's what's going on in these churches that James is writing to. And James wants them to make a choice, to stop living in two worlds, to stop living in the grace of God, but not offer grace to others, in the forgiveness of God, but not offer forgiveness to others, in the love of God, but not love other people. What word does James use to describe this? Well, in verse 4, he's going to use the word adultery, which is the ugliest word I think I can think of. For somebody to make a covenant, to say, I'll be your spouse forever, and then to break that covenant, it's really hard. And we've all, with our family or our friends, we've all been hurt by this in one way or another, and we know that this is a real betrayal. So he says, you adulterous people. Man, let that hit you between the eyes. We're so worried about people being faithful to us. Are you worried about being faithful to God? Do you know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? You think, so we have to be these outcasts? No, you just have to worship God. You just have to be the friend of God. You have to make his priorities your priorities. Because you can't make the world's priorities your priorities and then call God an ally. You are making enmity. You are making strife. You're making separation between you and God. Man, James just wants people to choose. Just decide. Is it the world or is it God? Are you following Christ or are you doing your own thing? Make a choice. Stop living in two worlds. Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you suppose it is no purpose that the scriptures say he yearns jealously over the Spirit that he has made to dwell in us? God is not, in an immature kind of human way jealous, but he is jealous for us. And again, jealousy sounds like an immature word, but isn't it right for a spouse to be jealous for their spouse, to say, man, it's not that you can't talk to anybody else. It's not that you can't go to work. It's not that you can't have friends, but I don't want you entering into the kind of relationship we have with other people. I'm jealous for you. I want to be bound with you. I want for you and I to have something that is very special. This is the way God feels about his people. That's the way God feels about his church. So we can't be the people who say, yeah, God, we'll follow you. We'll be in even a marriage covenant with you. We'll be the bride of Christ. But I'm going to find my satisfaction other places. So James says, here's what to do. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Man, isn't that powerful? Verse 7, just submit yourself to God. Like, stop submitting. You're submitting to all kinds of things. You got to serve somebody, right? And so you're serving, you're submitting, even if it's just yourself. But for most of us, we're submitting to our jobs. We're submitting to our hobbies. We're giving our time. We're giving our money. We're giving our attention. And James just goes, just do that with God. Just submit to God and him alone. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Man, isn't that amazing? Christians are so worried about the demonic oppression in the world or the struggle. We all say, I'm wrestling with my demons. Man, resist them. Put your back into it. Try. Resist the devil and he'll flee from you. And then this other side of that promise is even more incredible. Draw near to God and he will draw near to you. This doesn't mean that you start the conversation. It means that God desires nearness with you. Will you just say yes? Resist the devil. Draw near to God. What does that look like in your life? What would you do today if your only hope was that you would draw near to God? Do you worry that he won't draw near to you? He desires to. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning and your joy to gloom. Do you see the picture as he started with you're arrogant, you're covetous, you get in arguments, you hurt people. That's what you are. Instead of that pride, instead of that arrogance, and just be broken. Just purify your hearts. Just be wretched and mourn and weep. Like, cry it out. Understand that Jesus is all you need and stop looking other places for what you don't need. And then even to this point where it impacts every avenue of your life, says even as it impacts your work that part of your life. He says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you don't know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this and live. And, it's not a semantical argument. He's not saying, hey, be sure you say if the Lord wills before everything. He's talking about your attitude. He's talking about your character. He's talking about your heart. And he's saying, look, you can't make worshiping Jesus one section of the plan. You don't say, oh, I have my life laid out. This is what I'm going to do. And then I'll pray for God to bless it. No, rather you say, God, what is it that you want tomorrow to look like? What is it that you want the next year of my life to look like? How can I submit to you in everything I do? Man, we got to make a choice. Not just to think Jesus is great, but rather we need to make a choice to submit to him and him alone. To not put enmity between us. To not make an enemy of God. But rather to draw near to him and find the joy in him drawing near to us. All right. Be loved.